As the nation grapples with a looming carbon tax, some are already selling carbon credits into the international market. 30,000 hectares of forest in Tasmania has been locked up for at least 25 years in order to sell the carbon instead of logging it. The current carbon price will fetch about the same as they'd get for the wood if it was sold as chips. The business, which has been handling the transactions, wants to get hold of some forestry Tasmania land, but the state-owned company says the numbers just don't add up. Although in its early days, there are also plans for a carbon-neutral fuel project in Tasmania.
It was a win-win, really, and that's what I really like about this whole thing. It's we can get high production forestry and we can get carbon credits.
Connerville in Tasmania's northern Midlands covers almost 18,000 hectares. The mixed farm has been in the O'Connor family since the 1830s, and it contains significant forest in the foothills of the Western Tiers. Mr O'Connor has decided some of those forests are now worth more standing than logged.
We've signed up around about 3,500 hectares of probably around about 80% of our forested estate or commercial forested native forest estate for a period of 25 years, which means we can't log. It has to be left in exactly the condition it is now, and that's audited and verified on an annual basis to prove that that is the case.
After a lengthy process, the carbon credits were verified for the market about a month ago.
We've had 2 offers. But it's only in the starting phase, and I think they what we probably could call searching offers.
RODERIC O'Connor estimates he'll get an annual income of between $250,000 and $300,000 a year for the next 25 years.
It doesn't have to be at the expense of a commercial forested operation, and we can actually fit this in over a long range. One of the main drivers for me in getting an annual income from this program of carbon sequestration is so I can spend it more on the remedial works on the farm.
The company he signed on with is RED Forests, an acronym for Reduced Emissions from Deforestation and Degradation. It's a commercial business headed by DICKEY. His business model is that landowners get paid for keeping their trees in the ground rather than logging them, and RED Forests take a cut of the sale of carbon credits.
If you avoid those emissions, you can claim the credits for what those emissions would have been. If those credits are worth more than the actual wood to the landowner, it makes sense that they will choose not to log and seek the carbon credits.
DICKEY formed the company 3 years ago, initially doing a proof of concept project of 800 hectares in Tasmania's north, before gaining international accreditation.
The first credits were issued in late April and sold, or are in the process of being sold.
He says they've sold 25,000 of the original 42,000 credits that were issued. Expressions of interest for the remainder have been signed.
One large tranche was sold to a Japanese importer of Australian wool who wanted carbon-neutral wool.
The company has 8 clients and 30,000 hectares under the scheme in Tasmania. Among those who've signed on are philanthropist Jan Cameron and Peter Downey, who was the first timber producer in Australia to gain FSC certification. In order to qualify, land must be under threat of logging. Already protected forests are not eligible.
The very first principle of being able to generate carbon credits is that you are avoiding emissions that would definitely happen if you don't do the project. If a forest is protected already, well, there won't be any emissions.
Credits roughly equate to tonne for tonne, so a tonne of timber to a tonne of carbon. But in some denser forests, the ratio can be higher. This week, a German company bought 2,000 credits.
That was at $15. The likely price going forward, in my opinion, will go 20, 25, 30, 40. We know that in order to make a difference in climate change, we're going to have to get up to $35, $40 a tonne quickly, and maybe even more beyond that.
That's why RED approached Forestry Tasmania for some forests slated for logging.
Looking at the figures with FT, it seems that it's about 3 to 1 for every tonne of saw log timber they get off a piece of land, they're getting 3 times the amount of chips. Well, I would argue that in a lot of those cases they would do better and earn a higher income from letting us lease that land off them and establishing a project.
Last financial year, the state-owned company sold $135 million worth of timber. Mr Dickey estimates annual returns to Forestry Tasmania from the sale of credits would be between $50 and $100 million. But Forestry Tasmania is not convinced.
There's not a lot of downstream processing in carbon credits. So in terms of the value of the forest and timber production to the economy of Tasmania, there is simply no comparison with the sale of carbon credits. For every dollar that we receive in income, there's at least $25 generated in the downstream economy in terms of employment. So it clearly doesn't make any sense. And the figures that have been quoted simply are unrealistic.
With the Forest Principles Agreement not yet a done deal, Mr Dickey says some of the forest under negotiation could be earning an income rather than locked away in a national park.
It's a great environmental outcome, but there's no money for the state. And I was under the impression the state would like to have some money. So I guess in that sense the timing of this is perfect for the consideration of the peace deal. It wasn't meant to be tied to the peace deal or to affect the peace deal, but it certainly should be something that I would have thought that they would want to consider.
While Mr Dickey is yet to convince Forestry Tasmania of the merits of the carbon market, he's confident of success with another proposal.
We're working hard to build a bioethanol plant here in Tasmania, which will use plantation wood and create some million tonne a year plant which will produce 300 million litres of ethanol a year.
Mr Dickey says the $400 million project could be operational in about 2 years.
We want to build it probably either in Scottsdale or somewhere where an area that's been badly hit from an employment perspective.
Mr Dickey says Tasmania is uniquely placed for such a plant because of the availability of plantations.
We're meeting with North Scotland this afternoon, so their waste would be very usable for us in the ethanol plant. It's like a whiskey distillery. You turn the tree into alcohol, in effect, ethanol in this case, and is the E10 part of petrol. As we move from E10 to E20 to E30, the demand for ethanol is increasing.
He says the plant would employ about 300 people, with more jobs in logging and transport. Mr Dickey's currently trying to lock in a supply of the plantation timber. But you do have investors?
Yeah, I've had plenty of people say, get that supply, I'll get you the money in a week.